What's up, Infected, and welcome to the Kwarenteen. Today we're going to be looking at expansion to one of my favorite deck builders, Tanto Cuore. However, we're going to be looking at the Winter Romance expansion. Now, I have to state that everything you see here is a Kickstarter prototype of the game, so it is going to be subject to change. Now, what is Tanto Cuore in general? Now, Tanto Cuore is a deck builder where you are the owner of a large estate and you are employing maids under your service, and those maids do special abilities, and you're just trying to make the most efficient estate, essentially. Now, mechanically, Tanto Cuore in general is a deck builder. You are buying cards to put into your deck and trying to make your deck more efficient. Now, the Winter Romance adds a few special elements to the game. Now, if you don't know how expansions work for Tanto Cuore, each set adds a new, unique aspect to the game, and you can play them all together, you can pick and choose, you can kind of do whatever you want. Winter Romance specifically adds the ability to have two cards become a couple, and it also adds male cards for the first time ever in the Tanto Cuore series. So let's head over to the overview. Now, what you're seeing here is everything that's going to be coming with this expansion. Now, I'm not going to cover the basics of how Tanto Cuore works, however, I will go over in detail kind of how this expansion alone works. Now let's meet some of the butlers that are a new addition to this set. So you have a butler chief, so for all intent and purpose, butlers are considered maids. So any card that would affect a maid will also affect a butler. Next up we have Sonny Corlissant and Martin Windsor. Then we have Herbie Forts and Jimmy Harrison. Then Dermont Gerhin and Shishido Kuragane. And lastly, Benoit Isbin and Nicholas Gabaretti. The game, of course, still comes with a whole slew of female maids as well. As you can see here, the set comes with 9 maids and 9 butlers. Now, what does all this mean? Well, some of the new buildings here that you can get are called meetup spots. So if you have one of these, you can buy it for 4 love, and you'll put it in your private quarters just like any other building. But if you have one of these in front of you, once at the beginning of your turn, you can choose what's called to make an approach. Now, how an approach works is you're going to look through your hand of cards that you drew at the end of your last round, and you're going to declare an approach. So you're going to pick any one of the maids or butlers that are in your hand, and you're going to declare to one other player that I am going to approach you. You're going to place your maid or butler face down on the table. Whoever you choose to approach has to look through their hand and find the highest costing maid or butler in their hand. So in this case, it would be this. They would have to place it face down. Now, the player who started the approach is going to secretly look at that maid or butler, and they're going to compare it with their cost. So in this case, my approaching is 6, their approached is a 7. So this would be a failed approach. You can, however, discard the difference between the two in number of love cards. So 7 minus 6 is 1. So I can discard a single love card from my hand. So the fact that this has a value of 2 on it is irrelevant. I can just discard a single love card into my discard pile, and then these would wind up becoming a couple. Now, there is no penalty for a failed approach. You just wasted your 1 approach for the round. However, if it succeeds, these cards will come together and you will put them into your private quarters like this, and your meetup spot will flip face down, and now will have an active ability giving you victory points at the end of the game. Now, it does need to be noted that a couple can be 2 maids, 2 butlers, or a maid and a butler. Now, the player who loses their card because they were approached and lost would be able to get a social bonus card. Now, this card is just worth a victory point, and it counts as a 1 love card. This would go in that player's discard pile. The player who approached and thus won the 2 cards would get a friend's card. Now, this card does absolutely nothing. It can't be played, but at the end of the game you will get 1 victory point for every 3 friend cards that you have. However, not all is lost. Yeah, you lost a card out of your hand, but you can also play a trials card onto a couple. Now, the person who owns that couple must reveal a card that costs 3 or more from their hand. If they can't, this couple breaks up, and the player who played the trials card gets to choose one of those two cards that go into their discard pile, and then the player who owns the couple would be stuck with the remaining card into their discard pile. Now the last card we need to talk about is the chapel. Now the chapel, when you play this, you will get to move one of your couples that are in your domain, and you're going to put it underneath the chapel. Now, the cards that are underneath the chapel cannot be affected by any card abilities, and at the end of the game, the card's victory points changes to 10 victory points if there's a couple under this card. However, you can play a blizzard on the chapel, which completely negates all of the victory points gained from anything under that card. Alright, Tanto Cuore, the Winter Romance expansion. Well, I'm not even going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to go ahead and say I really enjoy this expansion. The addition of the couple mechanic, where you can have two maids that form a couple, but that couple doesn't do anything unless you have those meetup cards, which can also be negated due to blizzards and a couple of the other cards from the other sets. So it adds kind of a new element to the game, which I really enjoy. Now, it's not going to be for everybody. If people who don't like mixing all of the sets and everything together, they're probably not going to enjoy the Winter Romance system. Because really all it does is it complicates the game a little bit more, which I'm not really saying that in a bad way, because I love what it adds. But some people may be turned off because it is going to make the game a little bit more complicated, and that may not really appeal to everybody. So if you're okay with doing really one of two things, if you're okay with either just having everything out on the field and give your players just a sandbox, here's everything, you figure out how you want to play, then you're going to love this expansion because it just adds just more meat to the game. Or if you're willing to kind of pick and choose what you like, which in my opinion is one of the things that makes Tanto Cuore really cool. If you don't like buildings, take them out. Go ahead and take out the buildings, take out the private maids. There's I think one or two of them that directly correspond to buildings. Take those out, and take out the one or two general maids that directly relate to buildings. Don't use them. You don't like events? Don't use the events. There's a couple private maids that deal with events as well. Don't use them. You can really easily it's a very modular game. You can use private maids, or not private maids, you can use the general maids from this expansion, most of them, and not use the romance. It's really not a problem, because a lot of these cards chain really well with some of the other expansions. Now, the fact that this game, there's 4 other expansions, well, there's base game and 3 other expansions, technically, with this game, there's no way I was going to be able to test the new set as thoroughly as I would like to. Now, I did play a standalone game with just this set, and then I did play 2 or 3 games mixed with everything else, and I made sure that I had a few cards from this set mixed in as well for good measure, and every game that we played, it played really well. Some of this sets, my wife wrecked me the last game that we played, and she had a single couple, and it didn't even really, I think it gave her 1 point due to, different modifiers and stuff. Outside of that, she didn't even touch couples, and she Goomba stomped me into the ground. So, you don't like the couples mechanic, but you just want more stuff, still pick it up. It's really not, it really mixes in just really well. And that's really all I have to say about the Winter Romance expansion. It works really well. It adds, way more cards to the game. That's just the same enough that it could easily just mix into everything else, but some of the stuff is just different enough to, really tailor the game to however you want to play. Then if you're like me and have the mind of a 12-year-old, you're going to have some, giggly combinations, such as when 2 of the exact same card wind up forming a couple. Really, the only negative that I can really say about Tanto Cuore is if you're not a fan of, adding more complexity to the base game of Tanto Cuore, then you may not like this set. But pretty much for anybody else that just wants more, more stuff to do, more cards to mix into the mix, so you have just more options and more variety to the game, I highly recommend picking this game up. And if you don't like Tanto Cuore, there's not really anything here that's going to change your mind. But if you even just mildly like Tanto Cuore, this is just going to add more. So you may wind up liking it more because it gives a more sandboxy feel to it. So anyways, that is my review review for the Winter Romance expansion of Tanto Cuore. I definitely highly recommend it. If you like my channel, stick around, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time in the Quarantine.